Hello, everyone. I'm Lachlan, the Program Officer. I've met many of you today and over the past few days, some I have not. So just note for this session, there'll be a QR code up on the screen with the Menti code obviously up the top there. So it is my great pleasure to now introduce Miss Rhonda Robinson. Rhonda is the Director of the Geoscience and Energy for the Maritime Division at the Pacific Community, which is a key partner of the Australian Water Partnership. Rhonda is the Pacific, same go. She leads the organization on the largest divisions that support the Pacific country and territories with scientific and technical solutions to address some of the region's greatest challenges. Thank you, Rhonda.
Nisambula Vinaka, which is hello, everyone. Can I get a little bit more energy? Hello, everybody. Thank you. All right. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on Ghana land and pay my own respects to the elders past, present, and future, and for the warm welcome that we as the Pacific people here have received over the last few days. Vinaka vakalevu, vinaka navevuke, vinaka navevosaki, which in Fijian means thank you for the support and thank you for the love. I'd also like to acknowledge the organizers and conveners, the Australian Water Partnership and DFAT, for your assistance in bringing everybody around the table and our voice to be heard as well here this week. And finally, before we get into the nuts and bolts, I'd just like to acknowledge that I don't stand up here by myself. I actually have people who've come from Suva with me. So Dave Hebblethwaite, who's our Water Security and Governance Coordinator. Thanks, Dave. You'll see Tom sitting behind Dave. Tom, can you just give everybody a wave? Who we've recently brought on board as a surface water hydrologist. And there are two Pacific people who've joined us this afternoon who I'd also like to acknowledge. Anesh, who used to be in our team and is now studying here in Australia. And he brought along another Pacific colleague who's come to join us as well. So that's us, and we're all here to answer questions in the Q&A section, not just myself. So if I can just maybe ask for the next slide, please. I'll run you through a series of slides because this often is the easiest way to tell our story. And also just a little bit about us as the Pacific community. We're the oldest intergovernmental regional organization in the Pacific. We were established after the Second World War, primarily to support our Pacific members to come back from the impacts of the war. We're the principal scientific and technical agency for our members, and we serve as an extension to our member country governments. So those of us who are based in the Pacific community support our member country governments, whether they be in the Water and Sanitation Department, the National Disaster Management Office, or what have you, in their own efforts and pursuing their own priorities. Can I get the next slide, please? Oh, okay. So just there. Okay. So just to give you a sense of the region that we cover and that we serve, this is not a small region. We primarily work with 14 Pacific Island countries where most of the work happens. And they spread from up in the north all the way down through the central part of the Pacific and down the south, west, and east as well. In addition to that, we also serve an additional set of countries that we call our territories, which are our French territories, as well as our US territories. And you'll see the additional countries there being, for example, the French territories, New Caledonia, Wallis and Futuna, French Polynesia, Pitcairn, and our American territories being the Federated States of Micronesia, Palau, Marshall Islands, Guam, and even the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas. So we cover and span the entire Pacific region. Given that we have French territories and our 5 metropolitan members, Australia, New Zealand, US, France, and the UK, we are also a bilingual organization. So we do have bilingual capabilities for meetings and things like that. In the work that we do in our division, the Geoscience, Energy and Maritime Division, and primarily in the water and sanitation space, this varies. And this slide is intended to give you a sense of what some of that work might look like. The water and sanitation program was brought in as part of our broader disaster and community resilience program in the division. And for those of you who have been sitting with us over the last session, you would have heard how as a region, we've brought our resilience efforts together a little bit in the division that I work in and in SPC. And this is sort of a sense of the water part of the work that we do. Really, it's about local evidence-based solutions to how we address the impacts of climate change and disasters and resilient development. To tell you a little bit about what our Pacific statistics are looking like in terms of access to at least basic drinking water services. So how are we as the Pacific region tracking towards the SDGs? And we spoke a little bit about that in the last day or so as well. Data collected by countries and submitted to the UN Joint Monitoring Program, or the JMP, provides some insight. So in this slide, you'll see that we're a diverse region, and I've showed you what that looks like, with vast differences in access to water and sanitation, both between and within our member countries. But as a whole, and you'll see that from the darker blue bar on the right at 57%, the Pacific region has the world's lowest levels of access to at least basic drinking water facilities. That includes statistics from Papua New Guinea as well. So that is a conversation that's also been had in the room. In terms of sanitation, again, you'll see us, the Pacific, represented by the darker green, 35% for Oceania. The situation in sanitation is even worse, with just over a third of our Pacific people accessing at least basic sanitation facilities, and approximately 1.8 million Pacific Islanders still relying on outdoor defecation options for their toilet needs. So these are quite telling statistics for the Pacific region. We're also, to give you a little bit more context, there are many complex issues and reasons for these persisting low levels of access. But one of the major factors is the region's relatively high proportion of people living in isolated rural and maritime areas. When I showed you the map, you saw vast ocean spaces, and that's between countries. Within countries themselves, some of those countries have very large rural populations that live out of the urban centers. And the Pacific is, by a significant measure, the world's least urbanized SDG region, with less than a quarter of our population living in urban areas, and even fewer accessing the services of centralized water facilities, water utilities. And I'd like to acknowledge the Pacific Water and Wastewater Association representative in the room. Thank you, Paul. And we've also got Lucia, who's going to be speaking to us as well today. And they represent the Pacific utilities and the work that the utilities are doing in the Pacific region. That's addressing the urban side of the story and not as much as the rural side of the story, which is what some of the statistics are telling us. So to give you a little bit more of a context setting, the challenge is further illustrated by data showing that there's a large disparity, again, of access between our urban and our rural population, the largest disparity, again, of any SDG region. Again, because much of our rural population lives in the bush in PNG, for example, and other Melanesian countries, and in remote maritime islands far from the reach of centralized services for water and sanitation. These services at the community level are basically managed at the household, village, or island council level. So, what could be some of the reasons as to why we're seeing some of these statistics? It's not that efforts are not being made. Don't get me wrong. The efforts that are being made, however, are not keeping pace with population growth. Every Pacific Island country and territory is taking action to improve this access to safe drinking water and sanitation. But in general, these efforts are just not keeping pace with the population growth and the movement and the accelerating impacts of disaster and climate change. This chart will give you a sense of that. and shows that the significant growth in Pacific people accessing at least basic water and sanitation between 2000 and 2020. However, in the same period, significant numbers were born into areas where these services weren't available. And that shows you that disparity. So some of the lessons that we're gleaning from the data, and the SDG data. There are too many people that we're leaving behind in this story. There are large inequities and disparities that continue to persist. But the SDG indicators alone don't capture resilience challenges. They don't speak to you about the availability of the resource, for example, over time. They don't speak to you about where some of those inequities might be experienced insofar as persons with disabilities, for example, or gender disparities, to the extent that perhaps give you a little bit more depth and meaning behind what these numbers are telling you. Pacific water challenges need to be evidence-based. We know this, and IRRM solutions focused. The cost of action can sometimes be high, but in all cases, far less than the cost of doing nothing. We know that there is no quick fix, and long-term partnerships for action are required at all levels. You overlay this sectoral data with how we're faring in terms of risk as a Pacific region. We know that from the World Risk Index, which is a measure of how vulnerable we are to various hazards, SPC's member countries are amongst the world's most exposed to these hazards, geological and hydrometeorological. For example, for consecutive years, Pacific Islands countries have occupied the top spaces in global exposure indices, such as the World Risk Index, which is what this slide is intended to show. So we find that Vanuatu, for example, is number 1. Solomon Islands is number 2. And there's no coincidence that that's the case, because they're not only being hit by hydrometeorological disasters, but they're also significantly impacted by geohazards, earthquakes, volcanoes as well. And then you see the rest of the countries also up there. This is to just show you, and we're leading into a message after a few of these slides, that the consequences of this exposure on our members can be quite profound. The impacts of tropical cyclones on the GDP of countries in our region, and in this instance, Samoa, Vanuatu, and Fiji, have been estimated at 45%, where you see TC Evan up at the top for 2012, 65% for TC Pam in Vanuatu, down the bottom, and 30% for TC Winston in Fiji in 2016. This, to give you a further context, this compared with an estimated impact of the millennium drought here in Australia of between 1 and 1.5 of GDP. So what does this do? We're currently in the cyclone season in the Pacific. It often starts for us in November to May. Those boundaries can be quite blurred recently. We're finding we're getting cyclones in the middle of the year, even sometimes. But over the last week in Vanuatu alone, we've had 2 cyclones hit Vanuatu, which, as you saw, was number 1 on the World Risk Index. Tropical Cyclone Judy and Kevin. Just as Vanuatu were coming back from Tropical Cyclone Judy, Cat 3, Tropical Cyclone Kevin hit them on the Friday. Not significant in terms of category scaling. They were around a Cat 3, but huge impacts in terms of rainfall and what the rainfall did to some of the communities and areas. That was also felt in Fiji in terms of heavy rains as well. There was a state of emergency declared in Vanuatu after the second cyclone on Friday last week. So there's a huge humanitarian response that's being mobilized at the moment with the humanitarian partners. The state of emergency is important because it triggers funding support that can come into the countries and into the region to help with the immediate response efforts. In the same breath, we're also having drought impacts in Kiribati and Tuvalu, our smaller atoll countries in the Pacific. And the same triple dip La Nina that has brought rain and flooding in parts of Eastern Australia, for example, has also brought drought to our atoll nations. And this slide here is just showing you that, over the last year and 2 years or so, our member country Tonga was hit by the Hunga Ha'apai volcano. Now, this was, someone mentioned in the previous panel, the compounding effect of hazards. Now, this is an example of how those hazards came together and compounded, where they were not only being hit with the fallout from the volcano, but also COVID. And for some of the humanitarian response partners, they said this was probably the most difficult logistical challenge that they've had to face ever in their lifetime, having to deal with how you would bring in humanitarian relief supplies into a COVID environment. So this is really just to show you that you have the water and sanitation sector, which we're working with as partners around this room. We're also, dealing with the impacts of climate change and disasters in our region and globally. And that has an impact on and undermines sustainable development or resilient development in our member countries and in the region. Repeating waves of disasters can throw Pacific nations off their plans towards sustainable development goals. So understanding the gap between pre- and post-disaster trajectories is critically important for countries to get on top of this situation and correct this path. How do we determine the nature of these events? How do we understand what is needed to address this? And that's why we've raised comments in the room over the last sessions about being closer between the water and sanitation sector and resilient development, the coherence of climate change, disaster risk reduction, and the sectoral work that goes on in all of our countries in the region. And finally, making the point clear to ourselves as water practitioners and our partners, water action is in fact a climate action. And we've been messaging this with our dialogue with partners time and time again. And so shifting to partnerships that have helped us to progress some of this work that we're doing in the Pacific region and at the country level. This example that I'm going to speak to now is one that we've been working closely with some of the partners in the room. And this is to do with strengthening our Pacific hydrology efforts. And this is something that's tied to the Australian Water Partnership specifically. Every year, flooding in the Pacific is responsible for millions of dollars of damage as they come from severe low depressions, tropical cyclones, etc. Disruption to business and communities, and too often loss of life. Flash floods are common in the Pacific, and they're characterized by steep catchments, short travel times, making early warnings very challenging for us. And that's why some of our communities and towns are caught by surprise. Within an hour, you go from one situation into a very different situation. Surface water hydrology underpins the timelines, accuracy, and confidence of these flood warnings. But there's been a gap in this work in the Pacific for a while now. We've been doing a lot of work on groundwater, and Anesh and his team, who, when he was with us in the team, were doing a lot of that in our atoll environments. We've started to build capacity in the surface water hydrology part of the story. So in partnership with DFAT, the Australian Water Partnership, as a technical partner, as a partner with us and a technical partner, Alluvium, we're now rolling out a program in 4 member countries. It's a practical partnership, which is what our members like to see. They like to talk and talanoa, as we say, but they also like to see on the ground action. And it's really doing a few things in these 4 countries: Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, and Samoa. And so we, as a member, as a regional organization, have been given our mandate to support the needs of our members in this space. And we've taken that to do a few things: convene, provide technical assistance where required, and the rest. So This partnership that we've established with AWP has significantly strengthened our capability in the surface water hydrology space. And that's been a really useful value add to existing networks and work we've already been doing. We understand the challenges, we understand the context, we do the brokering and the partnership building and have that long trust relationship with our member countries. Partnerships like this with AWP and Alluvium bring that added value, technical assistance, other partner support that can be brought to bear. So this work is really around a few things: stakeholder engagement and community engagement, technical support, knowledge exchange and capacity development, and development of a strategy for particularly improved flood early warning systems. We're working with existing capabilities. We're not building something new. We're working with what our member countries can absorb in terms of capacity as well, and strengthening and supplementing what capacity they do have. And we're identifying opportunities as they come along. And we recognize that our people are the most critical resource in all of this. You can count on your one hand the number of qualified hydrologists that are in the Pacific region in National Hydrological Services, and we do need to build that capacity. Stakeholder engagement, recognizing how important it is to have diverse voices in the room when designing, developing, and implementing these programs. Communities in the consultation around this particular piece of work, community members have said, you know, we didn't really understand how fast the floodwaters could rise. 1 minute we were in the kitchen at the sink, the next minute the floodwaters was in our house. So impact-based forecasting is really important. What does the forecast mean in terms of how that's going to impact them in that situation they're in and in the location they're in? So engaging early is really important. This is really to show that as part of this work, we're going to be developing a few catchment summaries for each country, a snapshot of flood risk, flood warning products, and hydrology. And these are really important for national member country governments to see, because they can use this in their dialogue and engagement internally, getting a buy-in from cross-ministerial support, etc. And of course, the all important monitoring, and more monitoring. Something that we're not best at in surface water hydrology. Finally, and this is the second example I really want to speak to, and it's about this piece of work that's been happening in the Pacific for a while now. The framework for resilient development in the Pacific. It's the first we've ever done in bringing our climate change and disaster risk reduction, disaster risk management efforts together into the one integrated framework. Why did we do this? Because our countries, more often than not, are the same people sitting at the table at meetings when we're talking about climate change and when we're talking about disaster risk reduction. So they called upon us, please, as regional organizations, can you bring this agenda together to make it easier for us, more efficient and more effective? And this was a result from that call from our members. It brought together a massive stakeholder process. The framework has been endorsed by the Pacific leaders. And we are now working as sort of practitioners and policymakers in the resilience space with this as our guide. And we fondly call this the FRDP. So whenever you hear someone from the Pacific mention the FRDP, this is it, the Framework for Resilient Development in the Pacific. The reason I speak to this as a partnership model is because underpinning the FRDP is what we call our Pacific Resilience Partnership. It is a multi-stakeholder grouping representative of resilience actors in the region. And it is this group that we take the discussions around our thematic work, our strategic policy direction, work that we're trying to do in addressing a particular political agenda, for example, that needs to be discussed. It has member country representatives. It has civil society representatives, regional organizations, etc. And we're using this as an opportunity to progress some of the work in the water security space and establishing an underpinning technical working group to drive what we think are really important actions in the water security space as they relate to the broader resilience agenda. We're currently working with AWP on this idea and looking at how we can best use Australia's expertise to better understand investments around integrated pieces of work. You know, you've done versions of this yourself. What does that look like for us in the Pacific region, and your contributions to that? Thank you. That's it. I got the graveyard shift, so I don't know how many of you actually took that on, but the slideshow is here. Naka. I will ask that Dave and Tom, if we're having a discussion, maybe come up. Is that okay? Come up and sit up here so that you can be part of the talk. Thank you.
We're on the home stretch, everyone, so stick with us. I'd just first like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to owners past, present and emerging, and also Indigenous people here today. Thank you for your hospitality as well over the last few days. My name's Rowan, I'm the program lead. It's really great to be able to talk with colleagues here about the Pacific. It's one of my first places where I started my career in development and humanitarian, and I can absolutely attest to the challenges of logistics getting to the outer islands and delivering aid and support. It's very challenging, and to see everything from earthquakes to cyclones to volcanoes, floods, community violence, it's incredible. You know, it's only 2 hours away, some of these things as well, where this is all happening. And I think we've got a role to play because everybody has the right to assistance, and we have the obligation, I think, to support where we can and using our skills. I'm going to introduce two speakers now who will respond to the presentation that you just heard. Firstly, Lucia Sefo-Liao, who's the CEO of the Pacific Water and Wastewater Association, and then Dean Taylor as well. So I'll introduce you both first, and then Lucia, if you can respond for a few minutes to Rhonda's presentation, then I'll pass the mic over to Dean. So Lucia is the CEO of PWWA and has held the role since late 2016. She actually helped establish PWWA as a permanent regional organisation for Pacific water and wastewater in Samoa. And she's held senior leadership roles in a number of government ministries, including the CEO of the Ministry of Revenue, Deputy CEO, Ministry of Finance, Deputy Secretary for Ministry of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And she is the driving force behind our partnership with PWWA and the new program we're about to start with the twinning program. Dean Taylor he works for Becker Hunter, and he's got extensive experience working across Australia, Vietnam, Fiji, Papua New Guinea and the Philippines. Most recently, Dean was the utility specialist engaged to support the Asian Development Bank to improve WASH in the Pacific region. And he also spends a lot of time, over 35 years of connection with Tonga as well, working often in a volunteer capacity to support their water systems improvements. So I'll hand over to Lucia first for reflections on Rhonda's talk, and then I'll pass the mic to Dean. Lucia.
Well, thank you, Rowan, for the introduction. I wish to acknowledge the presentation made by Rhonda. The highlights on the Pacific water, sanitation and climate challenges are glaringly massive. It is real and already present huge risks to people in our part of the world. The climate risks are exceptionally high, and many extreme climate events are already impacting communities. We are becoming more and more vulnerable to climate risk to water security due to sea level rise, droughts, floods, cyclones, groundwater decline, and deterioration in water quality and sanitation. I commend the work done by SPC in the water security arena in some of the Pacific countries, the support for building capacity in hydrology especially, and providing knowledge and products and early warning systems help communities respond and protect themselves from sudden emergencies such as flooding that we witnessed over the few years, not too distant past, and cyclones. SPC is a trusted and long-serving member of BWWA since BWWA was established. So we work together collaboratively for a number of reasons. BWWA is a utility membership organization owned by 30 utilities over 21 countries in the Pacific region. We also have private sector industry members that bring in industry knowledge. And we are also fortunate that we host a Water Ministers Forum annually. Having this group of water leaders is becoming more and more important as advocates for water at the highest level in the region and internationally. It is important to us, it's important to establish and build those relationships at the highest decision-making levels, because this gives prominence to how water should be regarded. As part of our work, we coordinate support for building capacities of water and wastewater utilities for their operations and maintenance needs. We have a young professionals program that support professional development of future leaders in the water arena, and we support building governance of utilities for sustainable and resilient water and sanitation in the Pacific. These two programs we have worked on with AWP over the past 6 years. And one other program that we do to support performance of utilities is the annual benchmarking survey. The data we collect through this survey highlight also the huge number of people that are left behind without basic access to water and sanitation, as highlighted in Rhonda's presentation. The total population served by your water utilities in the Pacific is about 2.9 million people, and that is only 25% of the total population in the Pacific, including Papua New Guinea, who that is 25% who have access, or 75% without access. If we exclude BNG, we still have only 55% of total population served by our utilities that have access, and those without still very high at 45%. The majority of our member utilities are state-owned enterprises mandated to serve mostly urban areas. And I think given the capacity and capability issues faced by all utilities, and as well as the huge financial investments required to extend that service to communities without water, but also improve current outdated infrastructure, that is a huge order. And I think what needs to be done is to encourage utilities to change the governance mandate that they have, if we truly are serious in having water security for those without. And I say this also because for economies of scale, water utilities are probably the best to provide that particular service for their countries. The countries are small, economic sizes are mostly small, and you don't want a duplication of services and infrastructure in there for your rural communities. Another important data from the benchmarking that adds to the issue of water insecurity is non-revenue water, which averages about 50 to 60% across all utilities. In one or two, this is as high as probably 87 to 90%. Now, I mention this because the issue is linked to challenges in water supply governance. It has been a persistent, recurring issue, linked also to limited technical and institutional capacity for asset management and for investment planning. I agree with Rhonda. The Pacific water challenges need evidence-based integrated water resource management solutions. And to effect that, the synergies should be encouraged between various players: the service providers, the communities, the resource management ministries, climate change experts, and sectors that extract water, such as water utilities, agriculture, energy, and so forth. And we should start by linking all the different sets of data available and generated regularly in different sectors, and start developing long-term adaptation strategies on improving water sustainability under climate change. And Yes, it is not an overnight task, and I've simplified that. I mean, I've made it so simple to take, but it is not. We need to ask the questions and do the research of where, what, and how need to be asked. Strategies developed will be multi-level, multi-scale, and we need to adapt to different climate risks and conditions such as floods, droughts, cyclones, sea level rise, and so forth. We did diagnostics of 5 utilities on where they are at in meeting SDG 6. It is a start. The opportunity to share knowledge through partnerships nationally in the region between countries and industry members of what is working and what has failed, and learning from them and from those synergies should be encouraged and linked to decision making and made a part of collaborations that build resilience of the Pacific. I thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thanks very much, Lucia. And I think, you know, if we're hearing more numbers, such low numbers, 25% of Pacific supported by water utilities, and backed up by the numbers Rhonda was telling us about, we should be outraged by it, quite frankly. These are human rights that are not being met in our backyard. And I think, you know, this is the time that we need to really start to lean forward a lot more. I'll hand over now to Dean to respond to Rhonda's and to also add his thoughts on the current situation.
Thanks a lot. So Rhonda might have had the graveyard shift, but I've got a hospital pass following on from Lucia. She's always such an eloquent speaker. So hello for Lucia. Good to see you. I've been working in the water industry now for about 40 years, working either in utilities or with utilities, and had the absolute pleasure for the last 10 years to be working in the Pacific. So it certainly has been a highlight of my career. A lot of the points raised by Rhonda today really resonated. And in particular, there are a few, and I've taken a few notes that I'd like to go through with you. So there's no quick fix for things in the Pacific. It really is about long-term relationships. As Ron said, a place like Tonga is really dear to my heart. I've been going there as a visitor now for about 35 years, and some of my best friends are Tongans, and there's a really strong Tongan community in Newcastle. After the volcano and tsunami, the word got around the Tongan community really quickly, big problem. And one of the major benefactors, a donor in Newcastle with $1 million to splash around, reached out to the Tongan community, and a foundation that I'm part of. So we've got $1 million to spend in Tonga, needs to be done fast and can only be done on water. So before we knew what was happening, on a plane to Tonga, and we're at the island of Awa, the southern island of Tonga, looking at a treatment plant that hadn't worked for 40 years. So they haven't had clean, safe water for 40 years, never worked. We went out and started investigations, community meetings, and people turned up and they were in tears thinking that someone's here to help them. So I think we've got, you know, we take it for granted here in Australia. We turn the tap on and most of us can get clean water. A place like Tonga, that's not necessarily the case. And a lot of the Pacific, you can't do that. So it's a really emotional issue, and pretty quickly, not just our community in Newcastle, a Tongan community, but it rippled out across the Pacific. Hey, something's finally happening in Awa. And we had, within a matter of days, hundreds of people following our project on Facebook, the US, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, all around the Pacific and around the world following this project. And it started to generate more and more momentum, more and more interest. And before we know it, it's not just the Tongan community, the people involved, it started to ripple up. The Tongan princess is actually the High Commissioner to Australia. So Princess got involved. Then the Australian High Commissioner in Tonga got involved. The Prime Minister of Tonga got involved. And before we knew what's happening, the royal family's involved. And on the final week when we were about to commission the project, the King of Tonga said, I need to see the Palangis, what's going on with this project. So we had an audience with the King of Tonga to explain this project. And the project wouldn't have happened without a network of strong relationships. So we'd worked with Tonga Water Board for a number of years. I knew Tonga really well, knew the community, and they knew us. So there's this web of relationships that this project was built on. There's no way you could ordinarily do a project trying to meet people, introductions, understand the country, build the trust up. So it wouldn't have happened without those relationships. So I think that's a key to working in the Pacific. You don't have to be in a country for 35 years to make a difference, but you certainly do have to take the time to understand the country and the people. And the more you're engaged and understand that every country is different, the more effective you can be and the faster you can do this sort of work. And it was really interesting after we'd done the opening ceremony, the dust started to settle a bit. One of my Tongan friends came up and said, "Congratulations, great job. You're really starting to understand Tongan culture now and what it takes to work in Tonga." And I thought, wow, it's only taken me 35 years. I must be a slow learner. The other one that really resonated with me too in Rhonda's presentation was about capacity building. And we've heard a lot about that over the last couple of days. So our project in Tonga started off from the Tongan perspective, just a few allies. So some people we'd worked with really closely in Tonga Water Board. We knew them really well, talked to them every week on different things. They trusted us, we trusted them. We knew we could work together. The rest of the Tonga Water Board team and people in government stood back a bit and said, look, you know, what are these guys up to here? Let's just stand back and see how this goes. We don't really know them. We don't trust them. This thing will fall over. There's no way they can do it. And the chairman and CEO of Tonga Water Board are going, nah, this just won't happen. After they engaged with us for a little while and a series of meetings, they went, actually, these guys might know what they're doing and might actually be able to do this. The more meetings we had, got to the point where they said, actually, we need to step in and help. We want this thing to be successful. By the time we did it, it was about 8 months from start to finish. It wasn't a project that we were doing to help Tonga Water Board. It was a project that Tonga Water Board were doing with our assistants. So we managed to turn that around and it became a joint project. So they're every much as part of that delivery as we were. And the thing we were proudest of is not that we actually achieved it and got it done on time and delivered clean water, but the people that work on the team, all the old guys there want to pass their knowledge on. So we had the Tonga Water Board and community people working side by side with us every step of that project. So they know where every pipe is, every wire, every nut and bolt. There was a Tongan person there. And that's really effective capacity building. Ordinarily, we would never do a project like that. It would be designed, a construction contractor would go and construct it, and then it would be maybe some commissioning and some handover, and people would walk away. And I think if you've worked in the Pacific, you would see the trail of failed projects. That's the model that's been the traditional model, handed over, and you go back there and say, you know, my job is to fix the previous work to get this thing done. And I won't mention where one of the treatment plants is, but there's one we're working on at the moment. It's been stripped for parts. All that's left is a civil structure because there wasn't enough training, development, financial capacity wasn't thought of. So they've had to strip this treatment plant for parts to keep the other ones running. So we see that everywhere we go. So yeah, we're really mindful on this project. Capacity building is absolutely essential, and you need to take the people in the country on the journey. And as we were talking about, it's a long-term relationship, long-term partnership. You can't just do a couple of weeks of capacity building and walk away and expect that it'll keep going. Climate resilience, as we know, it's a huge issue in the Pacific. The Tongans and other people in the Pacific are some of the most resilient people I've ever met in my life. We were there not long after the volcano and tsunami in Tonga, and it was just amazing how the community all rallied together. It's the third most disaster-prone country in the world. So they just got on with it, smile on their face, the community worked together and they cleaned things up. And the second time we went back after about 6 months, for most of Tonga, you wouldn't know there's been anything happened there. So really resilient. We did some work for AWP, developed a tool to assess the climate readiness of utilities. And we haven't finished that piece of work yet, but we have developed the tool and we piloted it with some of the bigger utilities. The thing that really stood out was that they've all got plans in place. If there's a cyclone, a flood, a landslide, they can respond, and they're really, really good at doing that. When you start to talk to them about the context they're working in and say, well, how does that fit in with your climate change plans? How does that fit in with government plans? How does that fit into your day-to-day business? Are you talking to your staff? Do you engage with your community to talk to them about the impacts of climate change? They look at you with a blank face. So they're really good at doing that, but they're not really thinking yet about the context. So I think there really is a piece of work there that the Australian water industry can help them with. I've talked to a couple of people over the last couple of days, and we talk about the old analogy about the frogs in the pot of water, that you slowly heat the pot of water up and the frogs won't jump out. I think the water industry in the Pacific's a bit like that at the moment, that they're good at responding to the immediate changes and the disasters that frequently strike them. But when they start to, you think about the slower moving things like increasing salinity in aquifers, for long-term changes in weather patterns, I don't think at the moment they're seeing those sort of things. One more minute, one more point. So the last thing, we talked yesterday about water and international relations. So part of our team, we often talk about this, about the soft power of water in the Pacific. There's a lot of work we do for the different donors. It really does make a difference to people's lives. And our Tonga experience really highlighted the emotional connection to water in the Pacific and how critical it is. So our project in Tonga cost about $250,000 to deliver it. And so a pretty small amount of money, but one of the Tongan politicians, Taniela, who's the representative for the area where the water treatment plant is, stood up and in his speech at the opening said that we've had teams from around the world come and try and help us with this treatment plant in Aiwa, but it was the Australian engineers that fixed it. So I think it really demonstrates the capacity of the Australian water industry for a pretty minimal amount of money to make a huge difference to the lives of people in the Pacific.
Great. Thank you very much, Dean. I think, the first point you made and then towards the end, but long-term relationships are key to any of this being successful. So I think that's a point well heard. We don't have much time, but we are going to just hear briefly, very briefly, from Dave and Tom. I'm actually going to shift the dial a little bit and just get their thoughts on, through their work, the benefits of a collaborative approach for the WASH and WRM sectors that you're seeing at the moment. And then we'll shift to a couple of questions online as well. So, Dave or Tom, what are your thoughts on the benefits of a collaborative approach of WRM and WASH?
Okay, so perhaps not just the benefits, but it's absolutely essential for a collaborative approach in the Pacific between WASH and water resources management. They're so close; they're not separate things. In some countries, or some parts of the world, there's a capacity to roll out water and sanitation solutions across the country. And perhaps the water resources are quite capable of being able to both provide water, but also to be able to handle sanitation, waste management as well. In the Pacific, particularly in smaller islands, human settlement has happened in really marginal areas. So even some of the areas that you'd think are impossible to live on in terms of water resources available, there's human settlement that's managed to adapt. So you just cannot consider any WASH solutions without considering the water resource management implications. And like Rhonda said, that in the Pacific, water and sanitation is largely managed at a household or local community level. That is the same for water resources management as well. So being able to empower Pacific communities to have information that perhaps confirms their traditional knowledge, delineates it, puts a number against it as well, so they can use that as a way to make decisions about the development of their resource in the future, where they might need to expand and move to, where they need to strengthen some of their resilience efforts is really, essential.
Great. Tom, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think I'll just further to echo kind of what Dean was saying around partnerships and capacity building. And for me, I've been in the Pacific only coming up 12 months, so I'm quite new to the Pacific, but also quite green to the development space. So, but I guess what has come across to me and what resonates through the partnerships between in this AWP project and working with technical partners like Alluvium and through the regional organisation SPC, it's that good relationships and, take a long time to build, and that vulnerability that you almost need to sort of admit or sort of talk about what is going wrong in your agency takes a long time. So that's what we've sort of been finding with the meteorological services and places that we've been working through, because they're so resource constrained that it's really easy to hit a yes button rather than sort of take the time to sort of work out where organizationally they might want to head and be able to open up that space for them to be able to communicate that.
Thanks very much. We have a couple of questions online. I think we're probably only going to get to one. Strict instructions to finish very shortly. But I might, sorry, Dean, I might avoid the Palangi here and just go to our Pacifica colleagues. There is one question for yourself, Rhonda, and also Lucia. Are there any key learnings that you can share about engaging with communities in a post-disaster context? How to navigate social tensions, undertaking recovery efforts, plus planning of future projects? So, Rhonda, if you want to start, and then Lucia to come in at the back.
Yeah, so in a post-disaster context, the message from our side is get behind the national effort. So they're the priority, they drive the agenda. And so our work has always been to support, in that instance, the National Disaster Management Office. They already have strategies, approaches, and plans that they deploy during those times. Our role is really to provide support and add and supplement or add value to that national effort. A lot of the work we do is brokering partners' engagement in that space during those very critical, first few weeks and months after. And also the transition between recovery and response, how countries are trying to prioritize getting the humanitarian relief items to communities, be there water bladders, be there shelter. And then the very gray area of how we then transition from that into how do we start to build medium and long-term actions that need to happen, and navigating the nuances and the politics and the sensitivities around all of that space. It's a fine art at the best of times, but messages get behind the national agencies that drive that work and support them in their own efforts in the way that they'd like to do it.
Localization is key. Lucia, would you like to respond?
Well, post-disaster, we do not have very much to deal with that in our area. What we do post-disaster is to get together all our members and see whether there is anybody who can help with any particular needs of a country that is having problems during disasters. For example, during COVID, there was an issue of not having enough generators for one particular utility in where they are at in providing a service. And what we do is to take that out to our utility members as well as our industry members and see whether there's anybody who would be able to help out there. What I do want just some final comments on this particular topic that we've been discussing is to say that governance, strengthening organizations, especially for us, our utilities, to be visionary and to plan long-term, in building their response to climate resilience, but also building capacity and start developing long-term adaptation strategies and solutions. I think to me that is probably something we had been working on with AWP and others, but I think should be taken further in looking at how these utilities are able to support their communities through good governance and capacity building. Thank you, Rowan, for allowing me the extra minute.
Understanding disaster risk, strengthening disaster risk governance to manage risk, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, and enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response. are all key themes that have come out here, underpinned by localization at the core of any sort of preparedness, prevention and response. I think there is the age-old sort of saying in DRR, which is build back better, but I think at the moment we should start to think about building back best to support our Pacific neighbours. Thank you very much. One session to go.
Thank you so much. So what we're going to do now is we're going to see Gavin Blake's final summary of proceedings for the last couple of days. As we mentioned yesterday, this will be available on the AWP event website. So Gavin will do a final couple of edits and put that up. So you'll be able to get a copy of this in due course. And then we're going to have, Catherine is going to come up and get you to do an evaluation, which is really important for AWP in supporting the process going forward. So do we have Gavin's animation? Beautiful. Just give you a moment to watch today's summary. Woo. It's so fast.
So this is the previous panel and the next last one now. You just go up and say topic.
Okay. So can you join me in thanking? I think that was particularly amazing because we literally just finished that session. So literally, thank you so much. I'm going to invite Catherine Cross now to the stage to do lead an evaluation of the workshop process.
Thank you, Tama. This is going to be very quick. It will only take a couple of minutes. So we wanted to just get your feedback. We hope you've enjoyed the workshop, and we really want to build on what worked well and what worked not so well. So again, you're going to go to Mentimeter. This is the last one. Well, we've got 4, but so we just, I'm not showing it on the screen, but if you're on your phones, you should see the first one where we're asking you for the first day, if you could tell us about your experience. There's a sliding scale. So there were 4 different sessions, one on intersections of water and climate with domestic and international policy. That was with DFAT and DQ. And we also had Anna Jackson and Pichiman in that session. We had the keynote from Dr. Analak, focusing on the Mekong. We had the excellent on-country experience led by Clem and Kwali, and then we had the workshop dinner. So you can rate all of those. I'll just give you 30 seconds to do that, and then we'll move to day 2. Okay, I think we can move to day 2. So again, just tell us about your experience today, and how did you find the engaging in conversations that matter? That was when we had the open space, where we had the marketplace, and then we all had the very interesting in-depth conversations. I know I enjoyed it a lot. We had the excellent panel led by my colleague Lucia on partnerships for climate action. And then we just had the keynote right now. So if you'd give us some feedback there, I'll just give you a few seconds. Okay, I think we'll go to the next one. So we just want to hear from you the topics that you would like to see at future workshops. So if you could enter that in. Hopefully you can enter information. You need to show the browser. So I'm seeing here climate finance, water and disaster. Yeah, you can see them up there. Climate, First Nations, storytelling, AWP future direction. We'll share all of these after. This is very important for our future planning as well. Yeah, I'll just give a couple more seconds to enter that. Okay, and then we'll just move to the last question. So we're going to make a word cloud together. What 3 words will you use to describe this year's partners workshop? You can be honest. Great, networking. Networking is a big one. That was our aim. Diverse, collaborative. Great, thank you. I'll leave it there. And I will hand over to Tamerlan. Thank you. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you. So just bringing the program to a close, and we're about to hear from Sarah to close formally the session. And I'd like to thank everyone for your participation, for your precious time, particularly for our speakers and those who have travelled from afar to be with us. We really appreciate you coming and spending this time with us and sharing your stories and your knowledge. So with the Partners Workshop, it's always a joy to come together and collaborate with all of you and do all of those amazing things that you've just written up there. So thank you and safe travels home. Just a logistical thing. Some people may be going to the airport, so suggest minimize your carbon footprint and maybe share a cab. Everyone will be walking in the same direction, I assume, and there are going to be buses which are going back to the hotel, I understand. So over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
I'm going to keep this really fast because it's been a couple of days and I think we all just want to finish. But I did want to say thank you to everyone for attending, first of all. I feel like it's been a really great event. It's so important to AWP that we have these opportunities to network and to share knowledge. So thanks for leaving your homes and being with us for these days. It's really important and we really appreciate it. And so great to see some new faces, as well as to reconnect with some of our partners who've been around for a longer period of time. Just to say thanks to our speakers. Tamerlane's already said this, but you just did such a wonderful job. And I really, really also appreciate the people who travelled to be here from afar, from other countries, particularly those who've come to speak and to share their knowledge. So thank you, we do really appreciate it. I'd just like to say thanks for the support for our members of ORPAC who are here today, and also from the eWater community. They provide us with excellent support, and yeah, it's really, really great to have seen them there. So thanks to Greg and Michael and Bob and Pishamon and Poling and Jeff and Anna, who I think is left now. But thanks for being here. I'd also like to say a quick thanks to our friends from DFAT, from DQ, from the South Australian government, and I think it's Victorian government here too. Yeah, we wouldn't be here without you. And it's really fantastic to see you show up in numbers and to provide your support, but also your thoughts and your insights as well. It's really valuable. A quick thanks to those who aren't in the AWP team, but sort of joined our team for this event, including Tamerlane. It does a brilliant job every time. Thank you so much. Yes, pause. Gavin, we love your work. Thank you. I'd like to thank Tom from Space AV as well. We've barely known that he was there, and that's a good thing when it comes to AV. So he's done an excellent job. And also thanks to Simon Brown over there, who's a photographer. He's from Department of Environment and Water. So thanks, Simon. It's great to have you with us for a couple of days. And finally, the AWP team. So you've all seen how wonderful my team is, and it's so good. Brilliant, brilliant people. I'm immensely proud of our work. This event was not an easy one to pull together, and particularly given the staff changes over the last 12 months, it's really an effort, and I feel so proud, so thank you. I'd just like to mention a couple of people in particular who've really pulled the hard yards to bring this all together. So that would be Catherine, Shreya, Lucia, and Zoe, who's unfortunately had to leave. But these people are water experts. Catherine's 20 years in the industry. Shreya's got a master's degree. Lucia also a long history in the water sector, and Zoe's got a huge comms background, but they really took on this logistical challenge and just kicked some goals. It was very, very well organised, and this is not their specialisation at all. So really want to acknowledge that. It's hard to explain how much work has gone into that. So it's been stressful at times, but you all did a wonderful job. Thank you. And thank you as always for your creativity and energy and yeah, such a professional group to work with. So thanks. And with that, I'm going to close. Thank you all for being here. See you next year.
When you call me.